Welcome once more to the Aurum podcast, where we discuss all matters in relation to building effective workplaces. I am your host. My name is Anthony Kuria, and I'm joined with my co-host, the in-house HR consultant, that is Zipporah Kuria. Welcome, Zippy.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning, viewers.
Yes, and today we have a very special guest. We are so glad to have Mr. Martin Wanjohi, the Chief Learning Officer of iPerformance Africa. Mr. Martin, karibu sana.
Asante sana, Mr. Kuria, and good morning, viewers and everyone.
Wow, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, today we'll have a wonderful podcast. I believe those of you who are tuning in, kindly tune in and pay attention. We are going to discuss matters in regards to the employee experience in regards to training and development. Now, the Aurum podcast is hosted by Aurum Consultants, and we are a human resource and risk advisory consultancy with a focused attention or to resolving difficult human capital issues via law and people and processes. And we are very glad today to be discussing this topic in regards to the employee experience when it comes to training and development, because this is one of the things that many employers find it difficult to factor in when they look at all the other things about themselves. So, Martin, since you're our honored guest, kindly tell us a bit about yourself and iPerformance Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Kuria. So, my full names are Martin Wanjohi Cairo, but I like going by the names of Martin Wanjohi. iPerformance is a talent development firm.
Okay.
Why I say talent development, we've decided that's where we're going to focus. We started out by training HR, then we got into a narrow space of talent development. So that's where we sit. I am a master instruction design with the Association of Talent Development, and then also a Palladium Balance Scorecard graduate. So what I do is I combine the perspective of strategy and L&D to enable our people to be able to deliver for the organizations.
Wow, wow, wow. I didn't know there is another. You said something about an association of training and
Yes.
development. Did I hear it right?
So
Wow.
ATD, or the Association of Talent Development, is an American, it's about 75 years old, American institute for people who are in talent development. They have members from right across the globe. And also what I do is they've developed a competency framework for people in talent development.
Okay.
So, and now, as I mentioned, our focus is talent development. We focus on training those who train people in organizations.
Trainer of trainers.
Yes, if you're developing talent in any organization, then you're most likely our customer.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. So even as we continue our discussions today, I'm sure we will get snippets here and there about how trainer of trainers, how that is done, how it's arranged, and how our listeners, those who would like to understand more, would be able to get in touch with iPerformance Africa. Now, today we are discussing about employee experience when it comes to training and development. And as I said when I was beginning a few minutes ago, most entrepreneurs, most business people see training and development as, can I say, a necessary evil or something to be done when I've established myself, when cash flows are good. And then again, there is the thinking, I train people and then they disappear, they are poached, they go. So now my thinking, the first thought that came to my mind is, we normally talk about training and development at the workplace. Now, the question is, are these one and the same? What is the difference between the two? Martin, kindly help us understand that.
Okay. Interesting question. This thought crossed my mind, I think about 2-3 weeks ago. And then one of the other things I do is I write, sometimes I write on a weekly basis. And one of my writing some time back was on what really is the development in the training and development. Now, let's start from the point of what is the purpose of training? So if you're in an organization and you're training people and the aim is not to improve their performance, sorry to say, you're wasting your money. If your training is not aligned to some skills that you want to develop in the employee so that they perform what they do better, again, sorry, you're wasting your money. Now, I mentioned something about a competency framework that for ATD. So for me, when I did that assessment, I got my individual learning development path. So training only offers like 20% of what you need to know or to be able to build the skill. So there is more that you need to do, and that's where your development path comes in. And we gain knowledge either by associating with others who do what we
Yes.
do, by reading for ourselves, what we call
Yes.
self-directed learning.
Uh-huh.
So the development part comes in after the training. After you have trained, then it becomes the so what and what is the path. Yes.
Uh-huh. So the training is to equip you with essential skills. Let me use the example of, I like using the example of accountants because, it's very straightforward. An accountant
Yes.
goes to do CPAs, even if they don't go to the university. If you want to be a specialist accountant, then you've got to do the CPAs from section 1. Is it section 1 to 3 or part 1 to 3, section 1 to 6 or something? There are 6
Yes.
parts that you do. Now you're finished. You have the theoretical knowledge. You have all the figures. You know how to look at a balance sheet. You can construct one. You know how to derive cash flows. You could be a managerial accountant. You could be a financial accountant. You could be all these things. But now you're hired by Aurum Consultants or by iPerformance Africa. Now your work is to come and help us manage our accounts. Now, as you say, the training that was done by KCA for that individual was 20%. Now, when it comes to Aurum Consultants to work for us, or it comes to iPerformance Africa to come and work for you, then the 80% that comes after that is what we are calling development, where this person is coming, he has his theoretical knowledge, he was taught this is how you do stuff. Now he sits, if he's fortunate, he can sit under a more experienced, somebody who is more experienced in accountancy. And then they tell him, okay, you studied about managerial accounts, I want you to derive this for me. Or you did about something to do with cash flow management, please come, help me, this is how you do it. So from what I get, what you're saying is the development aspect comes when, could I be right to say that the development aspect comes when you are on the job, you are, you've reached a fix, you need to go and consult somewhere, a book to read a bit further. You are under a trainer, you are under a mentor who is training you to come up higher. Can we look at it from that perspective? Is my scenario what you've just described?
Yes, you are, Kuria. And I'd like to start one step behind and start from, we need to distinguish between the academic learning and training, right? The academic gives us the right to play in the various professions we have chosen.
Sure.
Now, what unfortunately has happened in our space is we have taken the academic learn how we we teach people in the academic space and also brought that into the workplace. Now, corporate learning should be very quite different from the academic learning. When they come for a training, the theories, you should be able to provide information. We have various types of trainings. We have trainings that are knowledge-based, where you just go pump knowledge and information on people, right? So for knowing, right? But then knowing and being able to do something, two different things.
Sure.
So we have a second category of trainings that looks at the skills. Yes, you need the theoretical, but you have been to school, you can read that on your own. Let me focus on the skills part. And that's where we have not yet gotten to. And I think that's a direction. I know people have gone, anybody who has gone into a training, you go into a training and you have 120 PowerPoint slides, all full of information, which is too much, which we call that cognitive overload, which is a hindrance to learning. So when as an instruction designer, as a person who is designing the learning program, your focus should be what is the must know, or to be able to do something, what we call targeted learning. Let's to look if and then so now we when we do that, we come up with two kinds of information for the learners. The good to know, right? The history of, like if I was to train an accountant, the history of accounting, the people who contributed to the theories of accounting, they're good to know, but they will not help me do my work.
Sure.
Right? So that becomes information we give the learners to read on their own.
Sure.
And then in the training program, we focus is on what do we need these people to be able to do after this training program. And that's how also makes people have gone to trainings and they ask themselves, what was even the use of that training? Why? Because all what they got in that training program does not help them to perform better. Because remember we said, ideally, the purpose of a learning program is to help the employee perform better in performance, in their performance, and two, to address the business objectives. So again, if a training is not speaking to those two, then we're having a gap in the training.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Zippy, let me bring in you here from a HR perspective. What Mr. Wanjohi has just described, how does the difference between training and development help in improving staff to come up higher in what they are called to do?
Thank you, Anthony. And I think I would just echo what Martin has said. And before I do that, one of the things I've realized, and I think it's a sad affair, is where trainings sometimes are done to tick a box. So we have trainings that need to be done, and money needs to be spent, and people go for trainings, but those trainings don't add any value to what that employee is doing. Now, there's something Martin has said about doing targeted learning. When it comes to the workplace, I mean, when you're engaging these employees, they already have some certain training or some certain skill sets or qualifications, and that's the reason why you're bringing them on board, because you believe they're able to do the job. But you have to look at what is your strategic plan? What are your objectives as a business? Where are you looking at taking this business? And how is this person's skill set fitting into what you want to do? Now you have to define all that before you decide to say, this is a kind of training we need to give this person. Because if we jump all over the place and just give trainings without a very clear objective, then that training will be ticking a box. And like Martin has put it, you'll be wasting your money. Unfortunately, a lot of times we'll talk about, we have done so many trainings for our employees, they are not performing, and all this is not happening. But the question is, what kind of trainings are we giving to our people? Is it clearly defined? Are the objectives clear? Do we know what the training need is for these people before we even prescribe the training they need to be trained on? Now, when you look at development, on the other hand, Martin has laid down out that very well. even as you're getting trained at the workplace, you might also need to say, to get to that place of you need to develop yourself a little bit more. Maybe you need to be promoted, or you're hiring a certain position and you don't have the necessary qualifications. Of course, you can take the necessary steps to make sure you develop yourself. And depending on the organization, again, you can see whether they support that. If they don't support that, as an employee, you can take that as your own initiative. If the organization supports that kind of development, then take advantage of it. But I think the bottom line is to be very clear. What are the objectives? What are we trying to achieve here? What is this training going to do to help our people be able to perform their duties and be able to give us the output we are looking at as an organization? And I think that needs to be the basic and the bottom line for our trainings.
Aha. Wow, that is good. That is really good. So if you're listening to us and you'd like to send your comments on the same, we are live on Facebook at the moment. So send in your questions and comments that you may have on the live broadcast. As we continue, we'll have a sample of them. And if need be, we'll be able to even highlight and discuss on the same. Now, Martin, now that brings me to the next question. The next thought that comes into my mind, that, as I said at the beginning, most organizations don't give much priority to training their employees, but only consider the same when there are challenges. What should be the best approach when it comes to training employees?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kuria. Before I answer that question, I'd like to share some research that we did, some findings on some research we did in L&D around July of this year. So we found that it was the State of Learning 2021. Now, 63.7% of organizations cannot measure the return on investment on their annual learning budgets. So 63.7% actually don't know whether their learning programs work. Now, then 40.9% of the organizations in learning is a KPI checklist item. That is, you'll find people with a KPI of number of trainings attended, number of trainings run. Then we found some key challenges for L&D departments were, one, measuring the ROI on learning, and then most of them don't have a L&D learning and development strategy. And then key for us was the lack of trained learning and development teams. Now, I'll come back to that on the last one, but to go to your question. Now, unfortunately, and when I say unfortunately is because when things go wrong in any organization, the first budget to be cut is usually the training and development budget.
Yes.
Whereas L&D is actually what would get the organization out of the hole that it is in. Now, and that because why budgets are cut fast is because the top management, the CEOs, are not able to be shown that this budget realizes us this. Now, unfortunate again, we do learning because it is there, it has to be done. To touch on what Zipporah was talking about, training is not always the solution. So any organization, you face some problems, training, right? Any problem, training. And then when that training does not solve that problem, you say training does not work. But possibly the problem was not a training problem. Now, when organizations do their needs analysis, they mostly focus on the performance aspect of the needs analysis.
Yes.
There is about 4 perspectives that they should be looking in terms of needs. The business, what does the business need? What does the performer need? What is the performance required? Now, when you only look at one area, that the performer is not performing well, but you've not looked at what is the performance level required so that we can close that gap. You're just looking at closing the gap of the performance of the performer. That's where problems arise when the trainings, the training don't work as they were expected. Again,
Yes.
also, it'd be good to note here now, if your people are not performing well because they don't have the right tools, even if you train them in heaven, they will not perform.
Yes.
Because the
Yes.
problem here is the tools, right? So
Okay.
we have trainings issues and we have non-training issues. So
Mm-hmm.
if you
Mm-hmm.
try to solve non-training issues with training,
Okay.
it won't work, right?
Okay. Yes.
So there are departments or there are organizations that
Yes.
the L&D department is no longer seen as as a support department, but is actually it contributes. It's a commercial department. It contributes.
Okay.
It says,
Okay.
okay, we have a strategic objective of, let's say, a profit before tax of 1 billion. It says we will contribute 20% of that through our learning programs, and they're able to measure. And
Okay.
at the end of the
Okay.
year, say, this is our contribution as L&D. Now, if you consider an organization like that and you have budget cuts, I'll tell you one of the budgets that will not be cut is L&D because it
Yes. Yes.
contributes directly to the business objectives. Then
Uh-huh.
also, what we fail to look at is we have two categories of trainings. We have trainings that we can consider strategic, and these
Okay.
would be trainings that are helping us achieve what is in our strategic plan. And then we
Okay.
have the operational plan, the
Okay.
operational trainings. And these are
Uh-huh.
trainings that help us improve our operational, the way people do their things at the organization. Now, if
Okay.
there's a budget cut,
Uh-huh.
if finance or whoever is proposing we cut the training budget that is tied to the strategic objectives, in
Yes.
essence, what they're saying is, we don't think these things in the strategic plan are very useful to achieve. So,
Uh-huh.
so in that kind of situation, when we have separated those two, we will only be looking at the training budget associated to operations and not to what is what we term strategic.
Okay. Okay. Wow. 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 Wow.
Yeah.
Uh, I hope our listeners are enjoying what I'm enjoying because I'm learning new things here. You know, non-training issues and training issues, strategic training that relates to the strategic plan, and operations training that comes to dealing with the operations of the company. So, what Martin, you're telling us, the best approach is, I like the fact that you've said that it ought to be at a place where we are thinking, what does training and development bring to the bottom line? Okay, how does
Yes.
it enable us? I mean, what is its return on investment? And now, when you break it down to what is the strategic operating guidelines of the company vis-a-vis the operations which support the strategic aspect of the company, then you're able to quantify and say, okay, the L&D are going to bring 20% or 10% of whatever figure, so that when the figures, the guys who are counting the bean counters, when there's a downturn, like now what happened with COVID, when COVID happened, now some businesses had to scale down. Probably the industries were badly affected. And now, obviously, even if you're not badly affected, certain operations had to be shifted away from office settings. Now, I would imagine there are certain people who, okay, you are used to dealing with your boss face to face. Now you've got to have a laptop like you and I are having, and meetings are virtual. You're having department meetings via this kind of setting, and you're wondering, okay, how do we go about this? I know I was never trained to handle matters in this matter, and I can imagine if you had a worst case scenario in a company, trying to figure out, like now, right now, you're figuring, okay, what would happen if all of us were chased out of this office and we were all dispersed? Do we stop our operations? So do we bring someone like Martin to train us on certain aspects of working remotely but still being able to deliver results? I like that kind of thinking. Zippy, what having listened a bit to Martin, what's your take on his view on people struggling, they struggle with, you say training does not bring any results. But like Martin said, the issue might not even be on the training issue. It could be non-training issue. People don't have the necessary tools to be able to execute what they are doing. From a HR perspective, what's your take?
I totally agree with what Martin has said. It's not every problem that is a training issue. And it's important for us to be able to analyze and understand what is the need really. Why is this employee not able to perform as expected? Is it a training need? Is it tools they are missing? Is it the environment? What exactly is the issue so that we're able to prescribe the right solutions? But again, to come back to what you had asked earlier, what the approach is. There's something Martin has said, and I find it always very sad. When, there's, an organization is facing challenges, the first budget that is cut is always training. But not even that, you will find most SMEs, they don't even budget for it in the first place.
Absolutely, yes.
So you find a lot of times when there's a crisis is when we start thinking about training.
Yes.
But the question should be, should we wait until there's a crisis for us to say we need to train and develop our people? I always say when you start a business, there's always a goal to it. And the goal is to make profits. The goal is for your business to be able to grow and for you to be able to advance the course of your business. Now, you need to be able to look and see, do you have all that it takes for you to get the business where it needs to go? If you have people, do they understand where this business is going? And are they fitting into this organization? Do they have the necessary skills? Sometimes you have the skills, but you might not necessarily know the how of this organization. You might not know the culture of how we do things in this organization. And perhaps at that point, the organization needs to have some form of kind of trainings. It could be in-house trainings. It could be external trainings, depending on the need that you have analyzed and you have realized this is a need my people need. Now, talking about budgets, most SMEs have said they don't budget for it. And even when there's a need for training, you find they're still trying to run away from it. I always say, as an organization, start thinking about the best practices you need to have for your business. Start thinking about the things you want to do, and they become the culture, they become the norm of doing business in your organization, so that your people are not grappling in the dark. They know if I have this kind of a need or I have this kind of a skill deficiency, there's a prescribed solution to it, and I'm not left out alone to figure out what I should be doing. So one, I think it's important for us to think about, we need to have some sort of budgets. We need to learn to budget. The same way we learn to budget for salaries, we budget for other things. Let's learn to budget for trainings. Let's learn to make sure we are doing best practices. And training is a best practice. And I remember, in one of our coaching sessions, we were told, business people, most business people who are successful, there are some best practices they practice in their businesses, and that's why they succeed. So it's important for us to think about training as part of our best practices so that we can be able to advance our business courses.
Wow. Thank you for that. It looks like our guest is having technical problems, but I'm sure he'll log in back very shortly. Boniface Musembi, I can see you've asked a question. How should the success of training be measured? Boniface, we'll get back to you on that very shortly. Oh yeah, Martin is here. Martin, you can see there is a question by a gentleman called Boniface, one of our listeners. He's asked, how should the success of training be measured? If you have a short answer, you could kindly give it to him and even to the rest of us.
And unfortunately, there is no short answer. Now, the success of how a training should be measured starts right from when we are designing that training. That's when we plug in our measurement or our assessments. Now, there is a framework for measuring the success of training programs. It's called the Kirkpatrick's model, and it has about 4 levels. And then we add the 5th model from a gentleman called Philip, which helps in measuring the ROI. Now, most trainings, we measure them. The measure that is mostly used is what we call the smiley sheets. The whether the learners were happy with the venue, whether they liked the lunch, whether the trainer was knowledgeable, which is usually a level 1 in Kirkpatrick's. But we should go ahead and measure post the training, assess, did we actually have a skills transfer, which we then assess the learners. Then at level 3, we need to assess the behavior about 4 or 5 months, because a training is supposed to create a behavior change in the learner. So we need to measure that also. And the best people to measure that is the employee supervisor. What is he seeing different in the learner post the training? Then we also now then go to measure what is the impact. Now, we need to measure, to assess learners before we send them for a training program, and then after the program. Because then if we are not measuring them before or assessing them before the training, then we do not know what are their knowledge level, what are their skills level before the training. Then after the training, we assess them. And now the difference can only have come from the training. If someone was, let's take an example, if we are training a mechanic on changing a wheel, before a training, we're able to measure he takes about 5 minutes to change a wheel. Then we send him for training. Now he's taking 2.5 minutes. So he saved 2.5 minutes in changing a wheel in that operation.
Yes.
That can only be attributed to training. Now, if saving 2.5 minutes in changing a tire, if that person is a garage we are running and we have cars that need changing wheels, in a day, that 2.5 minutes to translates to more cars we're able to service. So
Sure.
how much is the training contributed in more cars we're able to serve? And that is also attributable to some revenue. So
Yes.
measuring needs to start right from when we are designing the training program, not when we send people to the training program or after the training program. It should not be an afterthought. It should be embedded in the design of the learning program.
Wow, 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 wow. You know, Martin, you've just described, you've made me remember a few years back when I initially joined the workforce. I joined the banking industry. And back then, training was a big deal. I joined one of the big banks back then. So then they had a training center, those sides of Karen. So you join like this, quickly you're taken 1 week for training induction. You're shown this is the culture of this bank, this is how we do things, this is how you ought to dress up, this is the way you ought to handle, you are this, you are that, this is how you handle, if you're whatever department you are working in, these are the minimum standards. And when you come in, so when you whether you are serving customers directly or in the back office, there's a minimum that is expected of you. So once you are gauged, after a while, they think, okay, let's accelerate your training. They decide, okay, Anthony, we want you to learn to be a cashier. Again, you're shifted 1 week to the training center. You're trained on how to handle money. I didn't know that the first time I learned there is a way you handle money, whether it's notes or coins. This is how you count them. This is how you do. This is how you avoid differences of overpaying or underpaying your customers, blah, blah, blah. And then once you come back from the training, you're not taken directly to serve customers. You're first, you go back office kidogo, you're helping the boss to to make sure that you're counting the notes properly, blah, blah, blah. Then kidogo, after 2 days, you put an account where there are not many transactions, so that the few people who come there, they want to deposit 5,000, they want to withdraw. Then you build your confidence, and then now you're told, now, dude, you're mature enough. Shika usukani. That you handle the big monies from millions to coins. And the best approach when I figure that, because I also worked with other smaller banks, which by the way never, even up to today, I'm really surprised, as you describe it, most of these smaller banks never take their staff for training. You come, una dive depend, you sink or swim. But now the difference between all that was that people coming from the institution where I was working, when they go to some of these smaller banks, and you are, let's say you are, you're still a cashier or you are the head of cash or whatever, because of the training you received while you are there, you come in like a fish in water. What's up? We don't do things that way. No, we do these things this way. No, you cannot do that way. That way you bring in frauds, blah, blah, blah. That kind of training, because somebody invested in training in you, you are very confident in whatever you are handling. From culture, what is expected of you as a banker, to whether it's operations like like cashiering, if it's operations like credit, blah, blah, blah. You have a mindset of a banker wherever you go. And all that came because of the kind of training that you received. As you say, once you bring in the aspect of what is the end result of why we are taking Martin or Anthony to go and learn how to be a cashier. The end result is we are reducing the overs and shorts. They are not overpaying or underpaying a customer. They are moving very quickly from one customer to another. In fact, some of the major banks actually measure their cashiers by how quickly they're able to deal with these transactions and how many transactions they're able to deal with. And then thirdly, that translates to profitability, because we don't have to hire 4 cashiers to handle a big crowd. We can put 2 there, serve efficiently and effectively. We get more business and we reduce our costs. So with that kind of approach, then you are able not only to measure what you're getting in terms of return of the training, but you're even able to project ahead and say, okay, next year we're going to put 10 cashiers on our trainings because we are opening this number of branches in different places. Now, Zippy, I know there was a point you were struggling with your connection, but very quickly, uh, what Martin has described about the issue of measuring of training from a HR perspective, what's your take?
Again, I totally agree. For you to be able to measure the success of training, it needs to start from when you're developing that training. And you need to have metrics on how you're going to measure the impact of that training on the employees. Monitoring and evaluation, we can't run away from it. A lot of times, I think we use monitoring and evaluation for the NGO world, but we don't realize it actually applies to our small businesses. So when we train our people, how are we going to monitor the skills that were transferred to them, whether they are having any impact in our business? And I think that needs to be very critical. One of the things I always like doing, and especially when I've had a session with people I'm training, is to first understand from today's session, what have you taken away? What have you learned? What lessons are you carrying and are you going to implement? How are you planning to implement as an individual? And one of the things I've realized, especially when you're training a team that is coming probably from the same department or from the same company, is to get them to own the process. Get them to discuss, how are we going to implement what we are learning? How are we going to measure? And help them through the process. Because if we just train and walk away and hope things are going to be better, the truth is they will not be better. And we go back to what we were talking about later earlier, where we ticked a box that we train these people on this particular area, but are we seeing the end result? Most likely no. If we don't do the monitoring and evaluation, if we don't hold the teams accountable, if we don't help them become responsible to implement what they are learning. And it's important for them to know, even as they are going for this learning or this training, we are expecting this training to have some impact. So they need to own up the whole process so that, again, it's not a one-man show, but everyone is involved. And I think there's power when you involve everyone and everyone takes ownership in terms of what they're doing. And at the end of the day, you are able to measure whether there's any achievement or not.
Actually, Zippy, you have really actually hit the partially answered my third question that I had in mind. That how can organizations ensure trainings add value to their employees and that there is a positive impact in the workplace? Martin, since Zippy has partially answered that question from a HR perspective, let me hear from a trainer's perspective. From your
Okay.
aspect as a trainer, how do you think that can happen?
Now, first, the key thing is here how to ensure that they add value to the employees. Number one, that value needs to first be defined.
Aha.
That's the first thing. Now, let me go back to what we were sharing on what was the purpose of training to improve the performance of the employee. How is the performance of the employee defined? The performance is defined through the competency framework or the job descriptions and a number of
Yes.
other things in the organization, the targets.
Yes.
Now, those trainings that we want to send our employees, we need to see that first, they are designed to solve that problem
Okay.
because that's where everything lies. We need to,
Okay.
if we're going to send to want to add value to the employees through trainings, it goes back. We need to design programs that are that are set to provide what we're seeing the gap is.
Yes.
Now, why the people also don't like going for trainings. Some people see them as a waste of time. Uh, now, right now, within the last 2 years, most of the trainings are virtual. So the per diems are gone, the big hotels and the good food are gone. So then, what remains with the training? Yeah, it
Yes.
just now remains the content of the training and what we want to enable the learner to do. So, as adult learners, we need to know why are we doing what we are doing. The what is in it for me, right?
Okay.
So, and
Yes.
the what is in it for me is just the employees being able to understand that this training has been designed to help me perform better. And when I perform better, in my performance appraisals, my marks will be higher,
Yes.
right? And then when my marks are higher, it means I get a better reward if
Obvious.
our 13th check or the bonus is based on performance.
Exactly.
So how we can add value is we need to relook at what kind of programs are we offering to employees? What purpose do we want them to achieve by them attending these trainings, right?
Yes.
It goes
Yes.
back to the strategy. How again are we formulating our KPIs around learning and development? Not, we need to move them from being activity based to outcome based. Even if you
Aha.
attend 10 trainings and your competency has not increased, you have contributed in wasting time and resources, right?
Aha.
Yes, you've
Aha.
checked that box, but then what is the evidence that actually there was something that came out of that training? So our trainings need to be tied to our competency framework, such that when we are sending an employee for a training program, the goal is to move them from maybe a competence level 3 to a level 4, or a level 4 to level 5, which is at the highest level, so that we want them to perform better. When they perform better, they earn more marks in the performance appraisal. When they do that, then they get a reward. Now, where organizations are not tying the outcomes of a training program with the reward aspect through performance appraisal, then
Yes.
the employee doesn't. Well, that's when they start saying, these guys are just disturbing us, sending us for trainings. I don't even understand why we are going for these trainings, because they don't see what the value is, right? Yes.
Wow, wow, wow. Martin, you've really brought some deep, deep stuff there. Activity versus outcomes. What is the purpose of sending an employee to training? And then, as what Zippy had said earlier, SMEs, that is medium-sized enterprises, sometimes don't see the value at all of training. The bigger NGOs and corporates might decide to be taking their staff for training, the ticker box and all that. But because the majority of the people that we're talking about here are medium-sized enterprises, you're wondering, okay, I have 15 staff, I have 20 staff. Why should I bother with training? So I like the fact that Zippy has brought in, and what Martin you've also brought in. The issue is, why should you take your staff for training? From a strategic perspective, do you understand why training your staff for purposes of implementing your strategic plan would be able to make that that further? If you're only taking your staff for training because of operations, then yeah, they will just learn, yeah, this is what am I supposed to do, and that's it. So, entrepreneurs out there, what we're saying is appreciate learning and development. Know that it's a very important part of you achieving your strategic objectives as a company, and then now design a training program that can enable your staff to be able to acquire the essential skills to take your company forward. Now, if you have been listening to us and you'd like to know more about Martin and iPerformance development, we would be glad to be able to get in touch, to be able to connect you with Patrick. With Martin. Martin, kindly, how if somebody was interested in getting in touch with you, how they get connect with you, even immediately.
Okay. The first would be maybe through our email address, which is martin@iperformanceafrica.com.
Sure.
Also, our website, iperformanceafrica.com.
Okay.
Or if someone would want to connect on phone or WhatsApp,
Yes.
my number is 0722 163 053.
Brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Martin, we really appreciate your time. We as you were talking, man, I was just, as we are discussing these matters, I was also writing notes. Why? Because learning never stops. You never stop being, being trained and receiving. And we want to appreciate you very, very much for coming. We hope that we will have you soon, once more in our podcast, where we can be able to continue discussing more on issues of training. Now, we've come to the end of our podcast today. We want to thank you, our listeners, for listening in. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Zippy, for the great insights that you have given to us, and for our viewers also for engaging us. I can see even comments are still coming in. I can see, yes, there are comments in regards to, those were comments in regards to Martin's contacts. Thank you, our backroom team for posting them there. Now, we will continue bringing insights on different aspects and topics of the working environment. And we want to tell our viewers, our listeners, that you're welcome to give suggestions or comments on the topics that you'd like us to discuss on this podcast that relate to the HR aspect of the workplace. So, with those few remarks, we are truly appreciative. Martin, we are really appreciative of you coming. Thank you for taking your time to, above all, teach us something new, that you are a trainer of trainers, that you train those who go to the workplace to train their staff. That's something that I found very, very innovative. And even to you, our listeners, for taking your time to be with us. So you can join us next week. Next week, we'll be having what we call our webinar. We normally carry out for about an hour. We have a panelist of several experts whom we sit and we discuss as a panel various issues that we've been discussing on. For example, this month we've been talking about employee experience. And therefore, kindly log in. Be sure to log in next week, same time, same place, where we'll discuss these issues of employee experience in greater depth. But until then, we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us, and God bless you.
Thank you.